The candle shook in its holder as Evelyn Harrington slipped through the long corridor of Ashford Manor, her footsteps so soft they barely disturbed the silence. For 5 years, she had mastered the art of being unseen. She knew which floorboards creaked, which corners swallowed light, and which hours allowed her to move without notice. In this house, invisibility was her shield, and survival depended on it. The grandfather clock in the main hall struck 9, each deep chime echoing like a warning. Evelyn stiffened. "Miss Harrington?" Lady Henrietta Pembroke's sharp voice rang out, heavy with irritation. "Where have you gone now? My letters will not answer themselves." Evelyn gathered her skirts and hurried forward, smoothing her plain gray dress, chosen because it never caught the eye. "Coming, my lady," she replied, her voice calm, practiced, obedient. At 23, Evelyn had long accepted her place. She was the illegitimate daughter of the late Earl of Westmoreland, a truth never spoken aloud, but never forgotten either. Too well bred to be a servant, too stained to be family, she existed in a narrow space between worlds. Lady Pembroke had taken her in after her mother's death, not out of kindness but obligation, and never let Evelyn forget it. Inside the sitting room, Lady Pembroke glared over her spectacles. "There you are at last. Sit. The invitations to Lady Caroline's autumn ball must be answered today." "Yes, my lady." Evelyn sat at the small writing desk and dipped the quill into ink. Lady Pembroke dictated with her usual sharp commentary on society, who mattered and who did not. "Have you heard?" Lady Pembroke said suddenly, her lips tightening. "The Duke of Aldridge has returned to England after 3 years in Scotland." Evelyn's quill paused for a fraction of a second. "That man has finally emerged from hiding," Lady Pembroke continued. "Not that it improves his reputation. The scandal of his wife's death still follows him. People do not forget such things. Everyone knew the story. Sebastian Blackthorne, Duke of Aldridge. His wife had fallen from the cliffs near his Scottish estate. No proof of wrongdoing, yet whispers clung to his name like fog. "They say he will be visiting Ashford tomorrow," Lady Pembroke added, her eyes gleaming. "My nephew hopes to secure his support for the railway venture. Heaven help us if that man brings his dark presence into this house." "Surely that is exaggerated, my lady," Evelyn said softly before she could stop herself. Lady Pembroke's eyes snapped up. "Mind your place, Miss Harrington. A girl of your birth has no business forming opinions."
"I apologize," Evelyn said quietly, lowering her gaze as the familiar sting settled in her chest.
Later that night, Evelyn retreated to her attic room, the only place where she could breathe freely. She sat by the small window, looking down at the moonlit gardens. From here, she could see the east wing and the library, her secret refuge. Movement below caught her attention. A tall figure walked alone along the stone path, his stride slow and deliberate. Even in the darkness, his presence was commanding. He stopped suddenly, as if sensing her gaze, and looked up. Evelyn stepped back into the shadows, her heart pounding. She did not need to see his face to know. The Duke of Aldridge had arrived early. The next day, Ashford Manor buzzed with tension. Servants rushed through halls, voices hushed but urgent. Evelyn remained close to the walls, assisting Lady Pembroke with her hair while enduring sharp warnings. "You will remain invisible today," Lady Pembroke said as Evelyn secured the final pin. "The Duke despises forward women, especially those of questionable origin." "Yes, my lady." Later, under the excuse of fetching a poetry book, Evelyn slipped into the library. The tall shelves and familiar scent of paper soothed her. Here she was not a burden or a secret. She was simply herself. "You move like a ghost through this house." The voice behind her was deep and steady. Evelyn spun around, her breath catching. He stood in the doorway, tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark riding clothes. His black hair framed a face carved with sharp lines, and his eyes were a stormy gray that seemed to see too much. The Duke of Aldridge. Evelyn curtsied at once. "Your Grace, forgive me. I did not realize anyone was here." "Clearly," he said, stepping closer. "Yet I have been watching you." Her pulse raced. She kept her eyes lowered. "You are not a servant," he continued. "But you are not presented as family, either. Who are you?" "Evelyn Harrington, Your Grace, Lady Pembroke's companion." "Harrington," he repeated slowly. "Any relation to the Earl of Westmoreland?" The question struck like a blow. "I do not deny it," he said quietly. "You have his eyes." Evelyn swallowed. "I am illegitimate, Your Grace. I have no claim." "Blood is blood," he replied. "Society's rules do not change that." Footsteps sounded in the corridor. James Pembroke entered, his smile faltering when he saw them. "Your Grace," James said quickly, "we were looking for you." "She was assisting me," the Duke said smoothly. As he passed Evelyn, he leaned close enough that only she could hear. "I see you now," he whispered, "and I do not lose what I find." Evelyn stood frozen as he left, her carefully built walls beginning to crack. The Duke's words followed Evelyn long after he left the library. She returned to Lady Pembroke's side, her hand steady but her thoughts in chaos. For the first time in years, someone had looked at her and not seen a burden or a mistake. He had seen her. Ashford Manor did not let such thoughts linger. That evening, the household gathered for dinner, and Evelyn took her usual place at the small desk near the wall, ready to record notes if needed. From here, she was meant to fade into the background, yet the Duke sat angled toward her, his presence heavy, his awareness unmistakable. James Pembroke spoke eagerly about railway routes and profits, his voice loud with confidence. The Duke listened, calm and unreadable, though his eyes drifted more than once toward Evelyn. "The numbers do not align," the Duke said at last. James laughed nervously. "Minor errors, I am sure." "Deliberate ones," the Duke replied. "Your companion noticed them this morning." Silence fell. Lady Pembroke stiffened. James flushed. "Miss Harrington," the Duke said, turning fully toward her, "would you explain your findings?" Evelyn's heart hammered. Every instinct told her to disappear, but his gaze held hers, steady and certain. She rose slowly. The funds assigned to the East Wing renovations were redirected through altered entries. The pattern is consistent over several years. James slammed his hand on the table. "This is outrageous." "Careful," the Duke said quietly. The tension broke only when a messenger arrived. The Duke rose, his attention never leaving Evelyn. "Tomorrow," he said, 9 o'clock. The library. It was not a request. That night, sleep would not come. Evelyn slipped from her room and made her way to the library, drawn by equal parts fear and resolve. Moonlight filled the space, pale and silent. "You need not hide." The Duke stepped from the shadows, a single candle in his hand. "I could not sleep," she said. "Nor could I," he replied. "Tell me what you know of your father's will." She shook her head. "Only that he paid for my education. Nothing more." Anger flickered across the Duke's face.
"He was my godfather."
"He would never have left you with nothing." Before she could answer, the door creaked open. James Pembroke entered, unaware. The Duke pulled Evelyn into the shadows just as James altered the ledgers with practiced ease. When he left, the truth stood naked between them. "They kept you ignorant on purpose," the Duke said. "Tomorrow, we will uncover everything." Morning came with dread. Lady Pembroke summoned Evelyn not to the library but to the morning room. James and Catherine stood beside her. "You are dismissed," James said flatly. The words landed heavy but not unexpected. "You will leave within the hour."
Evelyn met his gaze calmly.
"On what grounds?" "Impropriety," Catherine said sharply. Lady Pembroke added, "The Duke has departed." Betrayal burned through Evelyn, but she said nothing. An hour later, she left Ashford with one small trunk and a folded note hidden in her sleeve. "Trust no one. Wait for me. S." The carriage left her at the village inn. Inside, a woman with sharp eyes waited. "He is coming," the woman said. "And when he does, everything will change." By nightfall, the Duke arrived. "Ashford belongs to you," he said simply. The world tilted. Her father had left her the estate. Lady Pembroke had been her guardian. The theft had lasted 2 years. The next morning, they returned to Ashford together. Legal papers were produced. Lies collapsed. The Pembrokes signed away what they had stolen. By evening, Ashford Manor stood silent, emptied of those who had ruled it through cruelty. Evelyn stood alone in the library, overwhelmed. "You are free now," the Duke said softly. She looked at him. "And you?" "I am no longer alone," he answered. Something unspoken settled between them, fragile and dangerous. For the first time, Evelyn Harrington was no longer invisible. And the Duke of Aldridge had no intention of letting her fade again. Morning light spilled through the tall windows of Ashford Manor, touching walls that felt unfamiliar to Evelyn, though she had lived within them for years. The house was quiet in a way it had never been before. No sharp commands. No watchful cruelty, only space and possibility. Evelyn stood in the library, her fingers resting on the back of a chair that once had not been hers to touch freely. Everything had changed in a single day, yet her heart still struggled to believe it. The Duke of Aldridge entered quietly, his presence steady rather than overwhelming now. "You did not sleep," he said. "Not much," Evelyn replied honestly. "Every time I close my eyes, I think I will wake and find it was not real." "It is real," he said. "Ashford is yours. No, one can take it from you again." She turned to face him. "And you, why are you still here?" He did not pretend. "Because I choose to be." In the days that followed, the truth of Ashford's condition slowly revealed itself. Accounts had been drained, repairs delayed, tenants neglected. Evelyn listened, learned, and asked questions. Numbers made sense to her. Patterns always had. Servants watched her with quiet awe as she moved through the house, no longer slipping along the edges but walking openly, her head held high. Mrs. Pod, Hughes, the housekeeper, finally spoke one afternoon as she handed Evelyn a ledger. "We always knew," the woman said softly. "Some of us did. We were told to forget."
Evelyn met her gaze.
"You do not have to forget anymore." The Duke remained at Ashford longer than expected. Letters arrived from London, unanswered. Whispers spread through nearby estates. Some came out of curiosity. Others stayed away out of judgment. One afternoon, Evelyn found him in the garden where they had first locked eyes through darkness. "You should return to London," she said. "People will talk." "They already do," he replied calmly. "They always have." She hesitated before speaking again. "Lady Pembroke warned me about you." His expression did not change. "I expected as much. She said loving you would be dangerous." He looked at her then, truly looked at her. "Do you believe that?" Evelyn thought of the years she had lived small to avoid danger. "No," she said. "I believe living unseen is far worse." The Duke exhaled slowly, as though something heavy had lifted. Their connection deepened without promises or demands. He walked beside her, not ahead of her. He asked her thoughts. He listened. When she faltered, he waited. When she stood firm, he admired her strength openly. News finally reached London. Evelyn Harrington, illegitimate daughter of the late Earl of Westmoreland, had reclaimed Ashford Manor. Reactions were swift and divided. Some called it scandal. Others called it justice. Invitations arrived. So did warnings. One evening, a letter bearing an unfamiliar seal arrived. Evelyn read it twice before handing it to the Duke. "They will never accept me," she said quietly. "They may never," he agreed, "but acceptance is not the same as worth." She studied him. "And if they never accept us?" His answer was immediate. "Then we will build a life beyond their approval." Weeks passed. Ashford began to heal. So did Evelyn. Then the Duke spoke words that changed everything.
"I intend to court you,"
he said one evening in the library. Evelyn froze. "You do not have to." "I know," he replied. "That is why it matters." She searched his face, looking for command or expectation. There was none. "I have lived my entire life being told what I was allowed to want," she said slowly. "I need to choose freely." He nodded. "So do I." she smiled then, small but real. Then yes, you may court me. The announcement caused quiet shock. A duke courting a woman of questioned birth. A woman who had once served in silence. They attended gatherings together, sometimes welcomed, sometimes coldly observed. Evelyn learned quickly that confidence unsettled those who expected shame. She spoke when spoken to, then she spoke when it mattered. The Duke never interrupted her, never corrected her. He stood beside her, always. Winter arrived early that year. One night, as snow fell over Ashford, Evelyn stood at the window, watching the world soften under white. I was afraid of love, she admitted. He joined her. So was I. She turned to him, not because of loss, but because being seen means being vulnerable. And yet, he said gently, you were brave enough to step forward anyway. Silence settled, warm and full. He reached into his pocket and withdrew a simple ring. No titles, he said. No pressure. Only truth. Her breath caught. Evelyn Harrington, he said. I love you, not for what you own, not for what you endured, but for who you are. Will you choose me as I choose you? Tears filled her eyes, not from fear but release. Yes, she said, I choose you. They married quietly at Ashford, under winter light and open skies. No spectacle, no apology. Just two people who had found each other when the world expected them to remain apart. Years later, Evelyn would walk those same halls with confidence, her laughter filling rooms that once held only silence. And when people asked how the most feared Duke came to love a woman who tried to stay invisible, the answer was simple. He saw her, and she finally allowed herself to be seen.